Your successful cloud migration is what we're here to talk about today. Today's webinar is for individuals and companies that are using Atlassian server products, are needing to migrate off of those server products, and are wanting to learn what is involved and how to get started. I'm David Mitchell, and I'm here with my colleague, Scott Price. We are both consultants at Expium. We're both Atlassian certified. Actually, my qualifications aren't quite as interesting as Scott's, and reason being is last time I looked, Scott had acquired every certification that Atlassian has to offer, which is fantastic. Not only that, Scott leads and heads up our migration initiative here at Expium, which means he has some sort of oversight over every migration that we do. So, and see, after the webinar is over, Scott's probably going to punch me for gushing over him like this. But the way I see Scott is, in terms of migrations, is he is the consultant's consultant. I know that he's who I go to when I have questions about migrations, because he does have knowledge in his head that a lot of people, that a few people have. So it's great to have him be a part of presenting today. We're going to get started, but before we do, I have a couple of housekeeping items to address real quick. First thing is, as Scott and I present the material today, we're going to make reference to some resources out on the web, migration resources for you to have. What we've done in the past is we've posted those to chat as we've gone through. We don't do that anymore because there's so many of them that throughout the presentation you would have to occupy yourself with copying and pasting those links. We don't want you to have to do that. We want you to be able to just sit back, relax, and take in the material. We put a lot of thought into the material. We want the material to be useful to you, and we want every minute of the webinar to be worth your time. So we want you to be able to just take it in. So what we're going to do with all those references is, at the end of the webinar, our producer is going to dump that whole link into chat for you to grab at that time. So you can consider all of those resources there to be your migration research library. There's a lot of valuable information in there. It's as valuable, or maybe even more valuable, than the information that we're going to present in the webinar today. So definitely stay to the end to get that. Second item is, we do have some time for Q&A at the end, and we want to have time to answer your questions. So as we're going through the material, if and when you have a question, please make a note of that, hang on to that, whether it's something you need more detail about, something that's not clear, or just another question about migration in general that you want answered. Hang on to those, save those for us at the end. We definitely do want to have the opportunity to answer your questions. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Scott. Scott's going to get us started with an introduction to the cloud migration roadmap. Scott?
All right, thanks, David. And welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're here to join us for this cloud migration webinar. And our goal is really to give you some helpful tips to make sure that your cloud migration is successful. We want you to avoid some of the pitfalls that we've seen other people struggle with. And the first thing here is, we want to give you an overview of the cloud migration roadmap. This is a high-level overview, and this actually comes from Atlassian, and it gives you these high-level steps to assess, to plan, to prep, to test, to migrate, to launch. Those are very important milestones for your migration. And we actually are using that format as our agenda today. So the format of the webinar is based on that roadmap. We're going to give you tips and tricks throughout based upon that roadmap. So it's a very important roadmap. And one of the things I want to point out here early is that you want to start early with this assess process, especially. You want to get your InfoSec team involved. Depending on how security conscious your company is, you want to get comfy with cloud security and where it sits today. And so get that process started early. We've seen far too many migrations stall toward the end of the migration, once the InfoSec team finally started kind of getting caught up with what was going on and the details of where the data is stored and so forth. So to start that process early. And depending on the size of your organization, the complexity, the governance around decisions, this can take anywhere from 2 to 12 months. So don't be surprised if you're in a large organization that you're 12 months from the time you really start this assess process to the time that you've completed your migration. Okay, let's move on to the next slide, which is why migrate to the cloud. And so this is getting to the heart of probably why you're attending this webinar today. And we really see two primary reasons that people are migrating to the cloud. It's either push or pull. And so the push involves Atlassian pushing us really with the announcement of the server end of life. So on Groundhog Day 2024, server is end of life. And you've bought a perpetual license if you have server, and so you can keep using it into perpetuity. However, you're not going to get any security updates or feature updates after Groundhog Day 24. And if you've been watching the news lately on security, there are constantly being security patches applied for fixes that have been identified. And so that's one of the biggest cautions, about staying on your server past 2024. But that's one of the reasons that people are here today and considering migrating to the cloud is just because of this push. Server's going away. We thought it was going to last forever. It's not. So, so that's one of the reasons we're looking at migrating to the cloud. The other one, on a more positive side of the coin, is cloud features. Atlassian has taken a cloud-first approach. They really have, and they're putting their best features in cloud first, and sometimes cloud only. Some of their best features in cloud are not available on data center, and so and a lot of Atlassian customers have in their own organizations taken a cloud-first approach too. And so everything that they can move out of the data center into the cloud, they're trying to do that. And so that's one of the reasons that people are migrating to the cloud. We've got a great resource that we're going to give at the end of the class here. One is that retirement announcement on server, in case you haven't seen that. And then the other is a cloud roadmap. So you can keep an eye on the features that maybe you're interested in. There are some folks that they need a particular feature to come in the cloud before they're willing to migrate to the cloud. And this roadmap will give you an idea of when that feature is planned to be rolled out to the cloud. And so it's a great resource to have in your toolkit. Another feature for cloud is just the integration capability. You can integrate to server to be certain, but it's usually more complex and involves firewalls and network teams. And Atlassian has extremely robust cloud APIs that allow you to quickly and easily integrate to most of the other tools that you're using. So those are the big reasons of why we migrate to the cloud. The next question that comes up is, what can I migrate to the cloud? What are the options in terms of my product list that I can migrate to the cloud? And so first off is the Jiras, all of the Jiras, Jira Software, Jira Core, Jira Service Desk, and then also Confluence and Bitbucket. And Crowd, sort of. I didn't circle Crowd, but you see it in the list there on the third row. Crowd has a companion product in the cloud called Atlassian Access. And we've got a slide on this a little bit later on, but we'll drill into that a little bit. That involves your user management in the cloud. So this is the product list, and the rest of that list just is not available in cloud. And Bamboo is sort of with Bitbucket pipelines. And so as Bitbucket pipelines gets more robust, we see more and more people removing their Bamboo server environment and migrating to Bitbucket Cloud. And so that's becoming a real viable option now as well. Okay, I'm going to toss the baton to David now, and he's going to cover the next slide, which gets into the differences between cloud and data center.
Thank you, Scott. So yeah, now we're going to talk about the assessment phase, the assess phase that Scott referred to earlier when he was going over the roadmap. And this early phase, like Scott mentioned, is pretty can be kind of intimidating. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of things to think about. So we're going to try to cover everything that you might need to think about. In terms of what platform you're going to go to when you move off of server, you have a couple of options. As you may know, you've got cloud and data center. Our material today is geared more towards people that are looking at cloud, but you may be at the point where you're trying to decide which one would be best. So we have kind of a side-by-side comparison here, and let's just walk through and talk to it. In terms of scale, it's easy for people to feel that a cloud product or suspect that the cloud product would have a limited scale. And as you can see here, what this is saying is until just recently, a user limit, there was 20,000 users per limit. They just recently, like within the last week or month, nearly doubled it. It's now up to 35,000 per instance, along with unlimited instances. And I have never come across a customer yet that needed even 20,000 users, much less 35. But the point being here is that, and you can see that on data center, it's unlimited. But the point being here is that scale isn't really an issue with cloud. If you're wanting to go to cloud, it's gonna handle everything you would need, unless you're in a case where you have more than 35,000 users in an instance, then you pretty much, that would decide that data center would be the option for you. Reliability. Atlassian has a 99.9% service level guarantee in terms of availability. The way that compares to cloud is availability is determined, I mean, the way it compares to data center. Availability, reliability in data center relates to the fact that it has a clustering feature. And then beyond that, the reliability has to do with the way you manage it. The way each customer manages it well or not will affect that. So, and also, as you'll see in the data center column here, a lot of these aspects really just have to do with your management. In terms of security, it's also easy to think that the cloud is less secure than something that you manage yourself. I used to think that. I don't think that anymore. I can see now how cloud platforms can be more secure, are not susceptible to some risks that can happen on premise. In terms of governance control and in data center, that's completely up to you. In cloud, Atlassian at least brings a certain level of governance into the picture. That's not to say that you can't do additional governance on top of that, because you probably will, and we would recommend that. But Atlassian is you know, you're going to have at least a bare minimum based on what they do. And then difference between the two in terms of apps and third-party integrations. In cloud, what Atlassian has done is they have developed this program called Cloud Fortified Apps. And it's a designation that Atlassian, you know, they'll give the third-party apps a badge if the product meets Atlassian standards in terms of security, reliability, and support. So that Cloud Fortified badge may be something that you will look for if you're wanting to use a third-party add-in and it relates to something that's particularly mission critical or sensitive. You can look for that. It's sort of a guarantee that at least it's been scrutinized and held up to a level, a higher standard that Atlassian has set. Also, something to be aware of in cloud is that add-ons can be run on the third-party provider's server. It doesn't necessarily run within Atlassian's data center. However, Atlassian has addressed that. They have Forge, which is a serverless platform that they have provided where those vendors can host those on a platform that is controlled by Atlassian. So point being there, when it comes to the third-party add-ons in cloud, if it's sensitive information or having to do with that, you may want to look into where exactly the data is stored. And then, of course, in data center, it's stored within your servers. All right, next we're going to look at the subscription levels in cloud. So in cloud, there's a tiered subscription level, and they really only apply to Jira software, Jira Service Management, and Confluence, and also what Atlassian calls Jira Work Management. And so this is sort of just an outline of the differences, and we'll walk through and just look at some of the notable items here. In terms of automation, under standard, in terms of automation, you have Jira automation within the scope of a project. You don't have automation, you don't have global automation. You don't get, if you want that, that's something that you would move up to premium for. Another interesting thing about automations that's different from server is that in cloud you have a limited number of automation runs or executions based on the subscription level you have. So that would be something to keep in mind. At standard, you have a limit of 500 a month. So if automation is something that you're using extensively, you're going to want to at least move up to premium. And one of the resources that we have is it's a link to the differences in. It's on a different slide. I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's a link to the differences in automation between server, data center, and cloud, and it outlines that in more detail. Data residency is important to a lot of customers. That's available at the standard tier now, which is really cool. In the past, it was enterprise. I think it eventually got moved down to premium, and now it's available for all paid tiers. Advanced roadmaps at the premium level, that's something, if you're wanting advanced roadmaps, it's not available by subscription at a lower level. If you want that, you have to go to premium, so that can be a decision maker for premium. Sandbox is a feature that you don't get until you get the premium. If that's something you want, that would make premium more appealing. As I noted before, premium puts you at the point to where you can have global automations, where you can run automations that run across different projects. And then when we get to enterprise, something to note, this may or may not make someone company go to enterprise. Access is included with enterprise. You don't have to go to enterprise to have access. If you're at a lower paid tier and you want to have access, you can add on access by subscription. And that's noted here at the bottom of the slide. And if you're not familiar with Atlassian Access, that is a cloud version of the Crowd product if you're using Crowd on server. And the features that Access provides for you is single sign-on, user provisioning, security options, and audit logging. And to this, in terms of resources that we're going to provide you in the research library, we have a link detailing information about Access, a link to the cloud plan, the tier comparison of the different cloud plans, cloud pricing for Jira software, and specifically cloud pricing for Jira Service Management. Also note that if you have questions about licensing, please feel free to reach out to us at Expium. We have people that work with licensing specifically. That's their entire job. They'll be happy to answer your questions at no charge. We'd love to talk to you about that. So reach out if you have questions about that. The licensing can be confusing in cloud because there's a lot of moving parts. All right. Next slide, we're going to move on to something. This is something a little lighter. This is about the benefits of cloud. This comes from a survey that was taken of Atlassian customers, what they thought the top benefits of cloud are. We'll just walk through that. You can look at this and decide whether you agree with this or not. From top down, peace of mind about maintaining security and version upgrades. Honestly, that surprised me that that was the number one item. But apparently there's a lot of people out there that feel more at ease in cloud in terms of security and maintaining version upgrades. On the version upgrades, I can understand that because it just happens for you automatically. It's not something that you have to worry about and schedule and have downtime. So that's nice. Improved speed and accessibility, and I'll just lump that together with number 4, improved performance. This one doesn't surprise me at all. I think it may surprise some people because we tend to think of a cloud platform product as being less performant than an on-premise system that we access right through our network, where we're in the same building with that system or on the same campus. That is not the experience that most of us are having these days right now, because with remote working, people working from home, people working in different facilities and accessing a server or a data center instance in another location, in those kind of scenarios, and I'm speaking from personal experience here, the cloud platform is actually more responsive. It's faster. A data center or server instance isn't designed to be performant over the web, but in today's scenarios, so many of us are using server and cloud over the web, and it works. It's not real responsive. It's kind of slow, and it's workable. But if you've been doing that and you haven't gotten into cloud yet, when you get into cloud, I think you'll see that cloud is a lot more responsive, because cloud is built from the ground up to be responsive over the web. Employee satisfaction, interesting one. I'm not really sure what that's about. I know that people do like the interface in cloud better. I like the interface in cloud better. Maybe that's what that's about. The interface is more streamlined. It's quicker. It's easier to use. Maybe seem like a little bit of a challenge when you first get into it, but after you get used to it, you'll really like it, because it's just really snappy. You can get things done really quickly. Reduced total cost of ownership. I don't think that one surprises anyone. The total cost of running cloud costs less than running your own data center and your own hardware and everything that goes along with that. Improved security. I guess that's everybody has their opinion on that. Increased capacity for teams to focus on strategic goals. That's an interesting one, and I'm not really sure why that would be. It could be that the interface, it could be that they like some of the features in cloud. Cloud tends to have a lot of features that the server and data center products do not have. So that might be what that's from. Better third-party apps and integrations. I believe that there are a lot more apps and integrations. Well, there's a lot more apps. All the vendors are putting more effort towards cloud apps. In terms of integrations, when you're in the cloud, and Scott referenced this earlier, integrations are just easier in the cloud. So and as a result, there tends to just be more of them available and more of them implemented. So that's just sort of interesting survey. We can see what other people have thought the benefits of cloud.
And I'm really surprised at that number 8. I would have expected that to be much higher on the list.
Yeah, that's true. I'm the same way. I was kind of surprised with the order.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. Number 8, I would have thought would have been almost up to the top. All right, so to the point that we were just talking about, we're going to look at total cost of ownership between the two, and we're referring to another survey taken by cloud customers, and they say that their total cost of ownership went down by 36%. I don't think anybody's terribly surprised by that either. This slide kind of tries to illustrate that, and Scott, actually, I'm going to want your comment here in a minute. What's shown here is the cost of cloud, and then it shows if you're using an on-premise product, whether it's on-premise or you're hosting it somewhere else, that there are a lot of additional costs that you don't have in cloud, and that's why the total cost of ownership is so different. I think also the way that these blue items at the bottom are represented, it's trying to show that while licensing for cloud may be more, the total cost of ownership is still quite a bit less. And I remember in another program we were doing, someone made the point that licensing in cloud was more, but Scott, it seems like recently on an engagement we were working with, we were looking over these costs, and the licensing for their server instance would, or a data center instance, was actually more than what they were going to pay for cloud. So
Yes.
I'm not sure that even the argument that licensing in cloud is always more expensive. The licensing in
Yeah,
cloud can be less expensive as well.
I agree, especially with data center. When a person's doing the comparison between server and cloud, I think it's a lot tighter comparison. But data center is more expensive than server, and so yeah, I think the gap is going away a little bit.
Okay, that would make sense. Maybe they had server in mind instead of data center with this.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but it also just brings across the point that even with data center, or server, either one, people do sometimes forget about the cost of having that system administrator there to manage the servers. Those servers have to be maintained along with Jira or Confluence or Bitbucket or Bamboo. Those all have to be maintained as well. Upgrades, security patches, and so forth. So you forget about that cost. That's why they call it hidden cost here, but everybody incurs that cost. And so it's a good thing to point out and to draw attention to if you're making this real world comparison.
all right. So moving on with in the assessment phase, we're going to look at adjustments and challenges with moving to cloud. And the first item that we have here is in terms of marketplace apps. Some things to keep in mind as you're doing your assessment is cloud apps are different from server apps in that they live and exist within a different architecture. So a lot of these apps by these vendors, well, I was gonna say most, but I don't really know. A lot of them have both server, data center, and cloud version of the apps. Not all of them do. In your situation where you're running server, you may have some apps that do not have a cloud version of it. In that case, as you're doing your assessment, and if it's functionality that you absolutely need, then in that case, you're going to need to look into a different app that might provide that same functionality. Also, if that app does exist in cloud, you're going to want to at least pull up a cloud instance and do a trial run and look at it. It doesn't mean that the functionality is going to be exactly the same. In most cases, it's going to be different somewhat, and there may actually be less features available in the cloud version. In some cases, there may be more, but it's just something that you need to look at. So that's a part of the migration process that when we're helping a client with migration at Expium, we help them go through that assessment and the discovery of all of those apps. Another difference is in user and group management. If you're an administrator and you're involved with user management and you get into the cloud, you're going to see that there's going to be a lot of differences that you're going to need to adjust to. The UI is different in cloud. In no way, shape, or form is the user management in cloud a transplant of what's going on in server. It's a different UI. The way it's structured is different. A difference that companies need to get used to in cloud is that email address is the unique identifier for all users, and that's not how it is in an on-premise product. And so, and basically, the email address is the primary key. Every user has to have a unique email address, and that is an issue that needs to be resolved before you do your migration. And so I just want to say it again, because for some clients, it's hard for people to understand. I've recently had a client I've been working with. They've asked me 8 times, David, are you sure it's email address? Are you sure they have to have a unique email address? And I've told them yes. They just really want to believe that that's not the case, but that's a difference there. Groups are different in terms of what groups come out of the box. There's a variety of different administrators on a server-based product. You've got Jira administrator and just administrator. There's more in different types of administrators in cloud. There's site admin, organizational admin, and I don't even want to try to go into real deep detail because even that is in flux. And that's part of cloud. It's not that they're constantly changing everything to a point to where it's a nuisance, but they're constantly improving things. So it's not unusual to have some features be different now than they were 6 months ago. And that's something that they're in the process of improving yet again in cloud. Another difference is in terms of the UI. And I'm going to give you just a couple of real quick demonstrations on that. This is the cloud issue view. And this is different from what you see in server, in that in server you've got a whole slew of buttons across the top. You don't have that here. In server you have a button to click into edit mode. You don't have that here because you don't need that, because here in cloud they do what's called inline editing, and it's actually pretty nice. It makes it easy to just you can input and modify a lot of your information with just clicking. The layout of fields here on the right of the screen is different. This item right here is different in terms of well, this is both an indicator of what status the item is in, and it's also the control that allows you to switch from one status to the next. So this tells us this is in dev in progress. If we want to change it to a different status, we do the drop down, and the statuses that you can transition to are right there. We're used to seeing those over there. And when if a server user first switches to cloud, it can be really confusing because your eye just goes right to here and you're just saying, how do I transition this? And you kind of forget. You got to get used to this. But when you're used to this, you'll like it. That is just, let me move this out of the way.
It's interesting too, David, because I think when this new Jira issue view came out, it was very controversial. And people had a hard time getting used to it. But I think the tide has turned because we're getting so much more functionality in this now because they changed the architecture of the way this issue view works. And so I think people are starting to really like it now.
Yeah, people didn't like it at first because it was different. But for me personally, now that I'm used to it, I don't like going back to server.
Yeah.
I just like this better. Real quickly, we'll take a look at some of the differences that are in Confluence. This is Confluence in the cloud. When you do create here in server, you have an option to do a drop down and select which type of page you're going to create. You don't have that here. You just have to create a page, and then those options in terms of those templates are over off to the left. And after you create the page, that's the point where you click what template you want, and it'll apply that template to the page. Another thing to note, well, just in general, the editor in Confluence is different. In server, you have a couple of different lines of controls here at the top that you can work with. Here, you only see that there's one. And a reason for that is because a lot of the controls in terms of modifying items on the page are integrated with the actual item itself. And a table is a good example. So here's a table. Table options used to be up here. Now a lot of them are built in. You've got table options here where you can change some things there. If you want to get rid of the table, you just do it right here with the trash can. If you want to add a row, you just kind of go here, click this plus, and you add a row that way. If you want to delete a row, you can go like this and get the X and you delete a row. Same with columns. Let's see. You'll also see the double arrow button here, and you'll see this other places as well. This controls the width, the way the material is presented on the screen. So that applies to the table. It also applies to, here, let me just, if you add a layout, if you're going to do layouts, the controls for modifying the layouts are there with the layout, same type of scenario. Same type of control here for the width. And then also on a page in Cloud, you have the control for the width of the way the material is presented on the entire page. So this wasn't intended to be any kind of exhaustive demo of the differences, but just to make the point that the differences are there, such that we have actually had clients that we've helped with migrations request that we give demos and training sessions and walkthroughs of the differences between Cloud, the differences in Cloud. And we've done that. We take an hour session and just kind of take a tour and do a walkthrough. That is something that we recommend. If you don't do something like that and you're the day after migration, your users are going to sit down, they're going to have a little bit of a bump in the road if they haven't seen it before. The way that you do things in Cloud is all right there about the same place, but you may have to click around and try to find it. If you do the demo beforehand with your users, it can make that less of a bump in the road. And we recommend you do that, whether you work with Expium as a partner or another partner. You want to ask them if they can do that for you. In terms of Jira automation, if you are familiar with automation, really the way that automations operate in the two tools is pretty much the same. In terms of migration, one thing to be aware of is that the automations that you have in place on server don't migrate, they have to be recreated. That's just the way it is. Atlassian hasn't built into their migration tool any functionality that actually migrates that. Maybe that'll change in the future. In terms of automation though, and I pointed this out earlier, at the standard tier, you've got project level automation. You have to go up to Premier to have global automations. Another difference is that you may have to adjust to, and I mentioned this earlier too. In server, you've got an unlimited number of executions. There's nothing counting how many automations run. In Cloud, there's a limited number of executions. And noted before, standard, you've got 500. There's a resource here that's in the library that we're going to provide to you at the end. It's called Differences Between Automation in Jira Server and Jira Cloud. It outlines all of those. There's quite a few more executions available in Premier, but definitely go look at that. We've also got a demo in the resource library of Jira automation if you just want to see what that's all about. Advanced roadmaps. Advanced roadmaps is different in that it's really not that much different. In the past here recently, it was an add-on in server. Recently, it's been included as a part of data center. In Cloud, you have to go up to Premier if you want to have it. I believe we've also got a resource in the library that we're going to provide about advanced roadmaps if you want to look at that. Another difference in Cloud is that they have what's called Jira Work Management projects. This is basically, and I'm doing a demo of that. This is, it's basically something that takes the place of what was referred to as Jira Core in server. It's a little bit different in that in server, when you have Jira software, you've got Jira Core, everything that Jira Core provides, plus all the features of Jira software. It's not like that in Cloud. In Cloud, they've actually made Jira Work Management more of its own product. So it has some features that Jira software doesn't have. So we'll just take a quick tour of these. This is a Jira Work Management project. It has its own board. This is new and different from Jira Core. The board is not as configurable and full-featured as the boards in Jira software, but that's okay. It's a functional board. Jira Work Management projects have this list view. It's kind of a spreadsheet type of view. And I don't know what motivated them to do this. It looks like maybe they're trying to compete with Monday.com or meet the needs of Monday.com users. If any Monday.com users are looking at this, And this is a feature that you won't have in software. I know some people that have seen this and they really like this and they say, I wish this was available in Jira software.
That's me. I'm one of those. Yeah. I love that list view.
You've got a calendar right here built into the project. You've got a timeline. This, I don't believe there was anything like this that's a part of Jira Core. In Jira software, you do have a roadmap, a project scoped roadmap. This is similar to that, but this is a feature of the work management project. So that's just to kind of show you what work management is. It's got some different features, and it's a cloud thing. All right. Last thing down on this slide. Something that's different in cloud. In cloud, there's something called team managed projects. And it is exactly what it says. There are projects in cloud that are managed by the team. The thing about it is the way it's configured when your cloud instance out of the box, so to speak, is with this option turned on. And that's not a good thing. We really recommend that you turn this feature off when you're migrating to cloud. The reason being is when it's on, you will have users come stumbling across this option where they can create a project. And if they're not administrators, it only allows them to create team managed projects. Team managed projects are made to just be sort of an ad hoc workspace. If a group of people just need an area to work, they can create a team managed project and work in it. And that's good in terms of rolling out sort of a self-service model with your tools, but it turns into a problem when you have a team creating a project like that and they're doing mission critical work or dealing with data that needs to stay around perpetually and be accessed and interacted with across the enterprise, because those team managed projects aren't designed to be accessed that way. And then if you get in that situation, we've seen that, then you're looking at trying to migrate your contents from a team managed project to a regular project. That's not always easy because it wasn't designed to do that in the first place. I understand it's getting kind of easier, but again, so if you're going to migrate to cloud, we recommend that you turn that off, because if you leave it on, right after you get into cloud, that is not the time when you need some interesting new random things happening to make things interesting, right? You need things to operate pretty much exactly the same. You don't need this new variable in the mix. And in terms of using team managed projects, what we recommend is that you turn that on later down the road if and when you specifically decide to use it. And if you do that, make sure that you take the opportunity to educate your users on what team managed projects are, what they're for, what they're to be used for, and what they are not to be used for. Make sure you educate your users, make that clear, then turn it on. All right. I think this is my last slide in terms of assess, and then we'll get on to some new topics. When you're assessing your migration, one of the things you're going to want to look at is how long is this whole process going to take in terms of timeline. And in this case, we're talking about from the very beginning when you start evaluating things to the time when you've completed your migration. And this can be anywhere from 3 months to a year, depending on how complex things are. This slide sort of puts a focus on user count. User count can be one indicator of how complex things will be. If you have 5,000 users, it's likely that your migration is going to be more involved than if you have an instance with 100 users. But user count is not the only factor. And the other factors are listed here. And you need to think about these as all of these can, sort of stack up, contributing to the complexity of your instance. So the number and type of add-ons, if you have more add-ons, that's going to add to the length of time because there's going to be more evaluation and more accommodating for how that gets moved to cloud. Automation and scripting, if you have a whole lot of that, that's going to add to the complexity. Third-party integrations, again, adding to complexity. If you have multiple instances, again, adding to the complexity even more. So yeah, those are all of the things that can add to that complexity. If you're working with a business partner, a business partner can help you assess that and figure out what your timeline is going to look like based on because they've got experience doing migrations. If here at Expium, we can do that for you. If you work with a different business partner, they can do that for you as well. All right. After all of that deep material, I'm going to turn it over to Scott so he can help us all take a break while he talks about something a little bit lighter.
All right, thanks, David. That assess part of the roadmap is huge, and I just can't iterate enough to start early on that, because you've got some work to do in that assessment phase. So just briefly, we'll spend just a few seconds on this slide. We just want you to know that we are a platinum solution partner with Atlassian, which is Atlassian's highest tier. And what we do is we do training, we do custom development, we do consulting, we do licensing, and we'd love to help you with any of your needs in those specific areas. With respect to consulting, we have 3 real kind of practice areas. We do Agile at scale, we do migrations, and we do ITSM, and we have some great specialists in Jira Service Management that can help you with your ITSM needs. And we offer a really unique consulting engagement, which is what I call phone a friend. It's ongoing support. It's just, if you need some bench strength for your Jira admins, you can employ us to help you, for so many hours a month, and just feel free that you can call us anytime you need us, that sort of thing. Licensing, we do at no cost to you, and so that's a great feature to have, where we have someone that does licensing specifically, and you can call us and ask questions about licensing. We can help you co-term licensing, those sorts of things. And in addition, our custom development team, we have our own add-ons out in the marketplace. We haven't shown those today, but we do make and sell our own add-ons. Plus, we do custom add-ons for clients. So if you have any of those needs, feel free to reach out to us. And of course, training is what we're doing today, webinars. We have hands-on boot camps. In fact, we just rolled out a new one, which is a 2-day Jira Service Management boot camp, which we'll get into some of the ITSM stuff. And so you're going to have a link to our training area in the chat at the end of the webinar. So let's move on forward to the next phase, which is the plan phase, which is a pretty important phase also. And what we have here is one of the things you're going to need to plan is how you want to do user management. It literally is one of the most important decisions you're going to make with regard to your migration to cloud. And so you've got a visual here of Atlassian Access connected to an external directory, and then Atlassian Access, in this case, connected to multiple sites. Now, you may have one site, you may have multiple sites, but this is just an illustration that you can have all of those sites rolling out to one Atlassian Access organization with managed accounts, so that you can use SSO, user provisioning, and if you've got a very large user count in your organization, you're probably going to want to do that. But user management also is going to involve a really important look at your data, your user data. David mentioned earlier that the primary key for users in the cloud is email. On server, it's username. And you can create a user in server without an email address at all. You can have 5 users that all have the exact same email address. Server doesn't care, cloud does. And so you're going to have to look at duplicate email addresses, invalid email addresses that won't migrate to the cloud. People with no email addresses at all, their data won't migrate to the cloud unless you give them an email address. And that can be a really big issue. So this is a big part of your planning process, is what to do about user management. We've got a resource that we want to put in the chat at the end of the webinar about Atlassian Access, so that you can get more information about how that actually works. You don't have to use Access. You can manually create your users and manage their group access and so forth. But if you've got a large user count, you're definitely going to want to consider this. But plan on spending some time around user management, and you can start now just to getting an export of all your data and just analyzing that for duplicates and missing emails and invalid emails. That would give you a head start. The next slide is in the plan phase as well. And it's just some thoughts about work tracking primarily. At Expium, we're big on collaboration, but we're also big on Atlassian tools. And so these are just some illustrations of how we use Atlassian tooling to manage our own migrations. And so we use Confluence for here. You'll see app assessments. We manage all of our app assessments in Confluence. We manage our roadmap and advanced roadmaps. We use Kanban boards, of course, for team collaboration. And we use Confluence for probably the bulk of what we do in a migration is done in Confluence. We have project dashboards, reporting, artifacts, and the biggest and the most critical piece probably of the migration is the migration runbook. And we build that out in Confluence. So we know step by step exactly what we're going to be doing to prepare for the migration, during the migration, and post-migration. And so we really recommend using Atlassian tools for that. Another thing in this plan section you want to do is you want to be thinking about the best strategy. There's about 4 key strategies that people typically use. And so one is optimize and shift. So that's taking a look at your data as it is right now and modifying it if need be, archiving and deleting data that you don't need to take to the cloud. And that's usually the most recommended approach, is to take data to the cloud that is important and relevant and that you really need. Then there's a lift and shift, which is, just move everything from server to cloud as it is. There's a phased approach, project by project, or just starting fresh, greenfield approach. And we see more and more people doing that actually, and just using the on-premise instances in read-only mode for reference. But you need to define your strategy, and you also need to define your method, because Atlassian provides migration assistance. You can do a full site import, CSV imports, or space imports. So there are different methods, and you need to decide which one of those you want to use. And also, depending on your migration method, you may have to recreate some objects, such as dashboards and filters. There are things that just don't go if you use the migration assistance. And we've got 2 critical resources that are going to be there for you at the end of the call. What gets migrated with Jira Migration Assistant and what gets migrated with Confluence Migration Assistant. You'll want to take a look at those and use those to help inform your migration process. Okay, David, let's talk about preparing a little bit.
Okay, I know it looks like we're only halfway through the webinar, but these last few sections are really short, and I'm going to move really quickly because we do want to have time to take your questions if you have them. On that, feel free to go ahead and drop your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. You don't have to wait until the end. You can post those right now. All right, in terms of preparing for your migration, communication, you need to start socializing the migration and the change within your organization. You need to develop a communication plan so you know how you're going to disseminate that information, how and when. At Expium, we provide user communication recommendations and boilerplate emails, etc., to help you do that. In terms of preparing your server, you're going to have to look at your server, the version of your Jira server software, to make sure it is a migratable version. You may want to clean up your server. You will have, if you're working with us, you'll have a pre-migration checklist. If you're not working with a partner, definitely make one of your own. And like we mentioned already, review the cloud versions of your add-ons and your apps to make sure that they, you're just aware of how they may be different. All right, the next slide is also about preparation. You're going to need to create a runbook and a timeline for your actual migration process. And in this case, when we say timeline, we're talking about the actual time that it takes to execute each step of the migration. So you have an idea of how long the process is going to take. So you can make sure that you're going to get it done over a weekend if you're going to do it over a weekend, or if you're going to do it on a Friday. So you create that run book, and from your testing, you're gonna have a timeline. Make sure that you have that before you go into your migration. After you've prepared, you're gonna go into testing. You're gonna test your migration process before you get to your before you actually do your migration. Do a test run of it. You'll undoubtedly find some tweaks. You'll run into some issues, resolve those issues, update and improve your run book accordingly. Repeat your testing until it's stable and successful and predictable. Like the slide says, your goal is to have a stable and predictable migration process. You don't want to get into the middle of your live migration and have something new come up that you didn't encounter before. After you've done that testing, avoid modifications to your process between your final testing and your actual migration. If you modify your process, you really need to go ahead and test the process again. And actually avoid modifications to everything in that critical time. Don't modify your process, don't modify your environment, don't modify your software. Try to keep everything as static as possible. In terms of this, a resource that we're going to provide to you at the end is the Atlassian Cloud Migration Guide. Another phase of testing is after you do your testing of your process, you're going to do user acceptance testing. Select your UAT group from key managers, stakeholders, and users. Have them test common day-to-day tasks. Definitely have them test all of their workflows. Under no circumstances should you get on the other side of a migration and have workflows that are broken. So make sure you get that tested. Have them review the screens that they use. It's probably not going to be any problem with the screens, but they may look different. They may want to tweak them a little bit. After you've completed your testing, you'll be primed and ready to take the next step, which is the actual migration. Scott is going to talk to us about that right now. Scott?
Yeah, in terms of migrating, just basic stuff. Pick the date. One of the things to note, you want to arrange Atlassian support. Don't just assume that Atlassian is going to be there to support you. You want to arrange that with them ahead of time. And especially if you're going to migrate over the weekend, they generally don't provide weekend support unless it's a pretty large migration. So you might want to negotiate that, make sure that you have coverage. You can consider freezing cloud updates during your migration so that things aren't changing in the middle of your process. Get your communication out to the organization, let people know what's going on, execute the run book. Hopefully by this point you have a really good, reliable run book, and just run through that and set your servers to read only, limit access or provide warnings to people, and then we launch. QA the instance on the day that you're going live, make that go, no-go decision. And next slide, David. And then execute a rollback if you need it. And hopefully you don't roll back, but we always like to have a good rollback plan. Sometimes we like to restore a production environment to dev, migrate from dev, and rollback is really easy. Just start prod services again, turn it back on. But you do need a rollback plan. Send out your announcements, let people know how to get to the new site, what your support plan is, if you have office hours, a Slack room that they can ask for help, those kinds of things. Monitor and mitigate, but don't forget to reflect and celebrate. It's a big deal to do a cloud migration. There's a lot of complexity to it, even a small one, and so you need to celebrate the wins as you're having to take care of any issues as well. And so that brings us to the question and answer slide. So hopefully we have a little bit of Q&A to do.
One question. Do you have it pulled up there, Scott?
Yeah, it's will there be a recording I can watch? And the answer is yes. This will be posted on YouTube.
And also, I'll mention something real quick that I didn't mention before. I know we're at time. There's this cloud savings calculator that I somehow got excited and pushed right over. I was going to demo that. That is in the resource library. Look at that. If you're going to migrate, that is useful for everybody looking to migrate. It's a great tool that can help you. All right. That's all of our questions.
And we have now the resources that we mentioned posted in the chat. Be sure and grab those before you log off. And you can see our upcoming webinars and classes. We offer a lot of training, and so feel free to peruse those training opportunities. And thank you for joining us today. David, thanks for your time.
Sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.